A teenage queen just committed the ultimate act of treason against her own kingdom. My husband has died and I have no son. They say you have many sons. You might give me one of your sons to become my husband. I would not wish to take one of my subjects. I am afraid. With these words carved into clay 3,300 years ago, Egypt's most desperate queen triggered an international conspiracy that would end in royal blood spilled in the desert. A forbidden alliance, a murdered prince, a vanished queen, and the dark legacy of the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun. Welcome back to Crimes of the Crown, where we uncover the darkest secrets of history's most powerful dynasties. I'm Chris, and today we're traveling back to 1324 BC, to a time when Egypt ruled the ancient world and kings died young under mysterious circumstances. We all know the story of Tutankhamun, the boy king who ascended the throne at 9 years old and died mysteriously at just 19. His mummy shows evidence of a fatal blow to the head, though whether from accident, disease, or murder remains hotly debated. But what happened after his death? What became of his teenage widow, Queen Ankhesenamun? The answer involves international espionage, political assassination, and a conspiracy so audacious it nearly handed Egypt's throne to its greatest enemy. This is a story of desperate love letters sent across hostile borders, secret negotiations that violated every diplomatic protocol, and a murder that sparked a war between superpowers. Today, we're investigating the desperate gamble of a young queen who dared to defy tradition, the foreign prince who paid the ultimate price for her ambition, and the shadowy Egyptian conspirators who would stop at nothing to preserve their power. This is the story of the Hittite prince conspiracy, a crime that changed the course of ancient history and left one of Egypt's most fascinating queens erased from the historical record. But to understand this conspiracy, we need to go back to where it all began, with the strange and sudden death of the boy pharaoh himself. The year was 1324 BC, and 19-year-old Tutankhamun had been pharaoh for a decade. Despite his youth, he had successfully reversed many of his predecessors' radical religious reforms and restored stability to Egypt. He had a loving wife, vast wealth, and the loyalty of his people. He should have ruled for decades, but instead, he died suddenly and mysteriously. Modern forensic analysis of his mummy reveals devastating injuries, a shattered skull, broken ribs, and a missing breastbone. Some experts believe these wounds came from a chariot accident or a hunting mishap. Others suspect something far more sinister. See, the political situation in Tutankhamun's court was an absolute powder keg. The young pharaoh had no male heir, making the succession very uncertain. His closest advisor and likely regent was the vizier who had effectively ruled Egypt during Tutankhamun's minority. Was ambitious, calculating, and had everything to gain from the pharaoh's death. Then there was also Horemheb, the military commander who controlled Egypt's armies and harbored his own royal ambitions. These two powerful men had been circling the throne like vultures, just waiting for their opportunity. But there was one person who stood to lose everything from Tutankhamun's death: his 18-year-old widow, Ankhesenamun. She was not just mourning a husband, she was facing political annihilation. You see, Ankhesenamun was no ordinary widow. She was the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, making her royalty in her own right. She had been married to Tutankhamun when she was just 8 years old, a political alliance that had helped legitimize his reign. For a decade, she had been the power behind the throne, advising her young husband and helping to restore Egypt's traditional religion. But Egyptian law was absolutely brutal to royal widows. See, she couldn't rule alone. Egypt had never accepted a female pharaoh for long. Her options were terrifyingly limited. She had two realistic options. She could either marry one of Tutankhamun's male relatives or courtiers, or, on the other hand, face exile, imprisonment, or death, or all three mixed together. And A was already making his move. Within days of Tutankhamun's death, the vizier began pressuring Ankhesenamun to marry him. This wasn't romance, it was a hostile takeover. A was old enough to be her grandfather, and many historians believe he had orchestrated Tutankhamun's death specifically to seize power through marriage to the widow. The pressure was immense. Egyptian court protocols demanded a quick decision. Every day that Ankhesenamun delayed gave her enemies more time to consolidate their power. The court was buzzing with rumors, conspiracies, and threats. She was completely isolated, surrounded by men who saw her as either a political prize or an obstacle to eliminate. But Ankhesenamun had inherited more than just her parents' royal blood. She had inherited their cunning, their willingness to shatter tradition, and their dangerous habit of making impossible gambles. What she did next was so shocking, so unprecedented, that it would be remembered as one of the greatest acts of political audacity in ancient history. She decided to commit treason. See, 800 miles to the north lay the Hittite Empire, Egypt's greatest rival and most dangerous enemy. For generations, these two superpowers had fought over territory in Syria and Palestine. They had spilled each other's blood in countless battles, stolen each other's trade routes, and competed for dominance over the ancient world, which made Ankhesenamun's next move absolutely insane. She secretly wrote a letter to the Hittite king, forgive my pronunciation, Supiluliluma I, with an offer that would have been considered treasonous beyond imagination. But how did she even get the letter to him? This wasn't medieval Europe with established postal systems. Sending a secret message to your kingdom's greatest enemy required careful planning, trusted messengers willing to risk their lives, and knowledge of diplomatic channels that officially didn't exist. Ankhesenamun likely used Egyptian merchants who traded illegally with Hittite territories, or possibly desert nomads who moved freely between the empires. The letter would have been hidden, disguised, and carried through hostile territory where discovery meant certain death for everyone involved. When the letter finally reached the Hittite king, preserved forever in the Hittite royal archives, its contents were explosive to say the least. My husband has died, and I have no son. They say you have many sons. You might give me one of your sons to become my husband. I would not wish to take one of my subjects. I am afraid. Think about what she was proposing. She was offering to place a foreign prince, Egypt's enemy, on the throne of the most powerful kingdom in the world. She was willing to hand over control of Egypt's armies, its wealth, its strategic position, everything that made it a superpower, just to prevent her forced marriage to A. The Hittite king's reaction was recorded by his scribes. He was so shocked, he thought it must be a trap. Never in the history of international relations had an Egyptian queen offered to marry a Hittite prince. It violated every political, religious, and cultural norm of the ancient world. The Hittite king faced an impossible decision. If Ankhesenamun's offer was genuine, he could place his bloodline on Egypt's throne without fighting a single battle or spilling a single drop of blood. His son would become pharaoh of the richest kingdom on earth, controlling the Nile's wealth, its vast armies, and its strategic trade routes. It was every ruler's dream. But if this was an elaborate trap, he'd be sending his son to certain death and giving Egypt a casus belli for war. The Hittite king needed proof that this unprecedented offer was real. So he did what any paranoid ruler would do. He sent spies. Hittite agents were dispatched to Egypt with very specific instructions to verify the queen's story, assess the political situation, and determine whether Ankhesenamun was truly desperate enough to make such an offer. Months passed. See, this wasn't the age of instant communication. Diplomatic correspondence could take weeks or months, if not longer, to cross the dangerous territory between the empires. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, pressure was mounting on Ankhesenamun to accept A's marriage proposal. The queen was walking a tightrope. She had to appear compliant enough to avoid suspicion, while secretly hoping her treasonous gamble would pay off. Every single day brought new pressure from A's supporters, new threats, new reminders of what happened to Egyptian queens who defied powerful men. Finally, the Hittite king's spies returned with confirmation. The offer was real. The Egyptian queen was genuinely desperate. The succession was genuinely uncertain. And there was a real chance, however slim, that a Hittite prince could claim Egypt's throne. The Hittite king made his decision. He would send one of his sons to Egypt, but he would also prepare for the possibility of betrayal. The Hittite king chose Prince Zenanza, one of his younger sons, but reportedly one of his most capable. Zenanza was experienced in diplomacy, skilled in warfare, and intelligent enough to navigate the treacherous waters of Egyptian court politics. The preparations were elaborate and secretive. Zenanza would travel with a small but heavily armed escort, carrying gifts appropriate for a future pharaoh and diplomatic credentials that would theoretically protect him under international law. But everyone knew that once he crossed that line into Egyptian territory, those protections would be meaningless if someone actually wanted him dead. The farewells were poignant. The Hittite king knew he might be sending his son to his death, but the potential rewards were too great to ignore. If successful, Zenanza would become the most powerful ruler in the ancient world. If it was a trap, his death would give the Hittites justification for total war against Egypt. Zenanza set out from the Hittite capital with hope and determination, carrying not just his father's ambitions, but the dreams of a desperate Egyptian queen who had risked everything on this impossible alliance. But someone was watching. Someone who had everything to lose if this foreign prince reached Egypt alive. The journey from the Hittite capital to Egypt was treacherous under the best of circumstances. Prince Zenanza and his entourage had to cross hostile territory, navigate desert wastes, and avoid the numerous bandits and raiders who preyed on travelers. But this wasn't a normal diplomatic mission. Intelligence about the prince's journey had somehow reached Egypt ahead of him. Whether through spies, intercepted communications, or simply logical deduction, someone knew exactly when and where Zenanza would be the most vulnerable. The attack came suddenly, brutally, and with deadly precision. The prince and his entire entourage were surrounded and slaughtered before they could mount an effective defense. These weren't desperate bandits looking for loot. This was a professional assassination carried out by skilled warriors who left no survivors and took absolutely no prisoners. Prince Zenanza died in the desert sand, his dreams of an Egyptian crown turning to dust. With him died any chance of a peaceful Hittite-Egyptian alliance and any hope for Queen Ankhesenamun's salvation. When news of the assassination reached the Hittite capital, the Hittite king's grief turned quickly to rage. His son hadn't just been murdered. In his eyes, he had been lured to his death by what the Hittite king now saw as an elaborate Egyptian trap. The Hittite response was swift and merciless. Supilumiluma declared war on Egypt, launching devastating raids into Egyptian territory. This conflict would drag on for years, costing thousands of lives and weakening both empires. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, A moved with suspicious speed to consolidate his position. Within weeks of Zenanza's death, before news of the assassination could have possibly reached Egypt through normal channels, he had arranged his marriage to Ankhesenamun. The timing was way too convenient to be coincidental. Either A had incredible luck, or more likely, he had known exactly when the Hittite prince would die because he had ordered the assassination himself. Who killed Prince Zenanza? The official Egyptian explanation blamed bandits, of course, a convenient story that fooled no one with any political sense whatsoever. Desert raiders might kill for gold or goods, but they wouldn't massacre an entire diplomatic mission and leave the valuables behind. See, all evidence points to a sophisticated conspiracy orchestrated by Egyptian court officials. The assassins knew exactly when and where to strike. They had military-grade weapons and training. And key, they left absolutely no witnesses. This was a state-sponsored terrorism designed to eliminate a threat to Egypt's established power structure. A had the most obvious motive. Zenanza's success would have destroyed his path to the throne. But he also had the resources to carry out such an operation. Control over Egyptian intelligence networks, access to military units, and the political cover to ensure no investigation would threaten him. Yet A likely didn't act alone. Military commander Horemheb and other powerful nobles had their own reasons to prevent foreign control of Egypt. The assassination was probably a joint operation by Egypt's ruling elite, united in their determination to keep power in Egyptian hands. You see, but the real tragedy wasn't the murder of a foreign prince. It was what happened to the desperate queen who had tried to save herself through this impossible alliance. After her forced marriage to A, Queen Ankhesenamun simply disappears from the historical record. No inscriptions bear her name from A's reign. No administrative documents mention her. No tomb has been definitively identified as hers. It's as if she was systemically erased from Egyptian history. This silence is deafening and deeply suspicious. Royal wives were normally prominent in Egyptian records, appearing in religious ceremonies, administrative documents, and royal propaganda. Ankhesenamun's complete absence suggests either death or imprisonment so complete that she ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Did she die of natural causes, heartbroken by the failure of her desperate gamble? Was she murdered by A's supporters to prevent future rebellions? Or did she flee Egypt entirely, disappearing into exile where she could cause no further trouble? Archaeological evidence sadly offers no answers. Despite extensive searches, no tomb or burial site has been conclusively linked to Ankhesenamun. For a queen who was once one of the most powerful women in the ancient world, this absence is remarkable and tragic. The Hittite prince conspiracy had consequences far beyond the death of one prince and the disappearance of one queen. The war it triggered weakened both empires, making them vulnerable to other enemies, and contributing to the eventual collapse of the late Bronze Age political system. Egypt never fully recovered its international prestige after the scandal. The kingdom that had once dominated the ancient world through diplomacy and military might was now just seen as treacherous and untrustworthy. Future negotiations with other powers were complicated by Egypt's now ruined reputation for betrayal. The conspiracy also demonstrated the limits of female power in the ancient world. Even a queen with royal blood, political intelligence, and desperate courage couldn't overcome the entrenched interests of powerful men. Ankhesenamun's fate served as a warning to future royal women about the price of defying the established order. The Hittite prince conspiracy remains one of Egypt's most fascinating and tragic unsolved cases. We have clear evidence of the crime, Prince Zenan's assassination, and obvious suspects with means, motive, and opportunity. We have documentation of the conspiracy's origins in Ankhesenamun's desperate letter and its consequences in the war that followed. But we also have something remarkable and heartbreaking. The authentic voice of a young woman trapped by circumstances beyond her control, preserved in clay for over 3 millennia. Ankhesenamun's letter reveals intelligence, courage, and desperation in equal measure. She may have failed, but her audacity echoes across the centuries. This case shows us that even 3,300 years ago, power corrupted, conspiracies flourished, and the innocent paid the price for political ambition. The weapons may have been bronze instead of steel, the messages carved in clay instead of sent electronically, but the human drama remains timeless. Perhaps most tragically, we see how a brilliant political gamble, one that might have prevented war and changed the course of history, was destroyed by men who preferred familiar corruption to foreign influence, even if that influence came through legitimate marriage and diplomacy. The mystery of Queen Ankhesenamun's fate continues to haunt Egyptologists and true crime enthusiasts alike. Was she murdered shortly after her forced marriage to Ea, eliminated as a potential threat to his regime? Did she survive in obscurity, perhaps imprisoned in some remote palace where she could cause no more trouble? Or did she somehow escape Egypt entirely, living out her days in exile under an assumed identity? The answers may still be buried in Egypt's sand, waiting for the right archaeological discovery to unlock this ancient mystery. Until then, we can only piece together the evidence and imagine the courage of a teenage queen who dared to defy an empire. What do you think really happened to Queen Ankhesenamun? Share your theories in the comments below. Did she die a victim of political murder, or could she have escaped to write a different ending to her story? If you found this investigation into royal conspiracy and international intrigue fascinating, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Crimes of the Crown, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's darkest secrets. Until then, keep questioning the official story. The truth is always more complex than the history books tell us. And sometimes, the most incredible stories are the ones that actually happen.